The only thing that we're interested in is putting money in your wallet. If you want to bet the fights, if you want to have a little bit of action, you are in the right place. With my partner, Ian Parker, I am Brett Okamoto.
We're ready to rock between our parlays, our props, our straight picks. It's time to make money. Let's go.
That's right. It is time for UFC Best Bets this week. We got a UFC Fight Night card in Las Vegas here at the Apex. I will be there. Ian Parker will not, but he will be paying close attention over there in Florida. And Ian, this card I'm sure is keeping you busy, man. I mean, it's not unique for a card to have some short notice, late replacements, that kind of stuff, especially over the last year. But this card, man, really. Not how they drew it up, but we are left with an Aspen Ladd versus Norma Dumont main event and an interesting fight, I got to believe, to discuss and then also lay some money on potentially.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Look, sometimes we're faced with these challenges. That's what MMA is all about, and we got to make the best of it. A lot of value on this card betting-wise, and sometimes the short notice pays off for us. And I think with the two fights you're definitely referring to, we're going to take advantage of that.
All right, well, before we get to this weekend, let's look back on how we did last weekend. And you did pretty good, Ian. We took a look at the UFC Fight Night card. We also gave you some picks for the Fury-Wilder heavyweight trilogy fight. 8-2 overall last week. You hit a parlay. I hit a parlay. Plus 468 on the parlay. How about that, man? Hopefully our viewers got a little bit in on that action because plus 468 is pretty nice. 8-2 overall. Still room for improvement, though, Ian, I got to say.
Yeah, look, I'm more impressed with your parlay, to be honest. That plus 468 was fantastic. I'm thrilled that we hit our underdog, and the consistency across the board we were pretty spot on. Tyson Fury, if you're listening to this, I just needed you for one more round to go perfect. But hey, I'm not going to mess with you. You are the heavyweight champ of the world, so kudos to you, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to ask much more of Tyson Fury than what he did last weekend. Very, very impressive performance. But let's get down to business for this week. Let's take a look at the early prelims first for this UFC Fight Night card. Again, right here in Las Vegas. Some fights with a little bit of a wider spread, but others, under that 200 mark. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on all of these fights as we do every week, Ian, on these prelims. So let's go ahead and start it off with the curtain jerker, the first fight of the night. Ariane Carnelossi versus Estela Nunes at 115 pounds. Carnelossi is the favorite at minus 160. What do you got for me on this fight?
You know what? I like the line for Carnelossi. She reminds me a lot of Jessica Andrade. She's very tough. She's very physically gifted for this division, and her opponent hasn't fought in a little while. I think this is a tough task for Nunes. For Carnelossi, for me, it's the cardio here. As long as that holds up, we've seen her knockouts. We've seen her ability to grapple. She's such a tough fighter. And I think this is a good way to build her up in the division. So we're going to go with Carnelossi. And that line at minus 160, we're going to play it straight.
Okay. Carnelossi has, the UFC has not given her an easy road, or at least they've tried not to. She was booked against Talia Santos. She was booked against Mackenzie Dern. Both of those fights fell through, unfortunately, but they're kind of throwing her to the wolves here early in her UFC career. But you say that you think that she is up for it. Let's move on to another fight that I'm super interested in. It's Brandon Davis taking on Dana Bakaric. Brandon Davis, one of the better stories on this card, I believe. He was with the UFC 2018, 2019, extremely active. The guy fought 7 times during that stretch. Only went 2-5, but look at the competition he fought. Giga Chikadze, Zabit, Magomed Shapirov. A lot of those fights were on short notice. Got cut, came back 4-0 over the last 2 years, facing, again, Bakaric from Mongolia. What are you thinking about this fight, Ian?
Yeah, Brandon Davis, to your point, is a great story. Very tough fighter, very game. Pretty much says yes to everybody and anybody, and this fight's no different. He's taking on a very solid prospect. I think for this fight, though, I'm not comfortable going either way. For me, I'm going to go based on the toughness of Davis and how he is very difficult to finish. I think over 2.5 rounds at minus 175 is the way to play this. I think Dana is a tough fighter. I think his striking is what's going to be the difference. We've seen Davis not do the best against strikers that are that precise and so technical. But Davis likes to make this into a brawl. But we've seen that cardio. We've seen his toughness, his ability to grapple and get out of uncomfortable positions and go the whole way. I think over 2.5 is the way to go here.
I like it. I like it because I was talking to Brandon this week, and he said that one thing that he wishes he would have done during his first stint in the UFC is be more of a mixed martial artist. He felt like he fell in love with his striking too much, and that he may look to wrestle here and there a little bit more than he used to. So I would think that that would tend to also favor the over in that fight. So over 2.5 rounds, Ian's pick for that fight. Let's move to a featherweight fight between Ludovic Klein and Nate Landwehr. Nate Landwehr, 33, out of Tennessee, 1-2 in the UFC, so needing a win here. He is the big underdog, plus 300. Ian, is there value on the underdog, or we like the favorite here?
Nothing against Nate. Tough guy. He's got great mic skills after he wins, but we saw his 2 losses were by knockout. One of them to Julian Erosa. You know, and he's fighting a guy in Ludovic Klein who is very solid in striking, but also has the ability to go to the ground here. And Nate, we've seen him be able to defend off his back. I don't know how long he survives here. So we're going to go with the favorite, Ludovic Klein. Now, obviously, at minus 330, that's tough to go straight. So we're going to shrink it down the size. We're going to say that Ludovic Klein wins inside the distance. And minus 110, I think his groundwork is what gets it done. Unless Nate can really turn this into a barn burner like Mike Triziano did in Ludovic Klein's last fight where he lost, I just don't see that happening. We're going to go with Klein, again, inside the distance, prop, minus 110, sir.
I love that, man, because as I said, as I was looking at these odds, you know, some of these odds are a little lopsided. So when you can shrink it down, when you like the method to win, I love it when you give us those picks, Ian. All right, well, let's move on to Lupe Godinez, who we spoke about just last week. Godinez fighting at the UFC Apex last week. She now steps in on short notice against Loana Carolina. She steps in for Sijara Eubanks, who I got to say, I thought it was a pretty terrible idea for Eubanks to accept a short notice fight at flyweight, where she has had a very hard time making that weight to begin with. Now she's going to try to do it on short notice. Sure enough, she is out of the fight, and Lupe Godinez steps in on 7 days turnaround. That is the fastest turnaround in UFC history. Is that an advantage, disadvantage? How are you trying to handicap this fight, Ian?
I think this is different than the usual 7-day short notice fight where she won a couple of weeks ago. So it's not like she's been out of training. It's not like the weight is there. You know, we've never heard of her having weight cut issues, and she looked absolutely fantastic in her last fight. She was flawless in a fight that people thought was going to be tougher than they expected. I think this is a great opportunity for her to keep the ball rolling, get the momentum going, keep working on her skills, get that cage time. And for me, I like Lupe Godinez in this fight. Now, again, line's a little high. We're going to probably throw her in our parlay later on. But what she showed in that last fight, so many improvements from the one before, and I love that she's taking this on short notice. I think this is going to be a great matchup for her.
All right, so teasing that parlay, we'll hear about the other picks on that parlay as we continue going through this card. Let's go on to, let's see, a welterweight fight between Danny Roberts and Ramazan Emeev, which is pretty interesting. You got another guy coming off of a very long layoff here, and Danny Roberts, he's had a few fights scheduled. Fights fell through. I mean, just bad luck. Guy got diagnosed with COVID, had some injuries, fighting out of England, did not go to Florida, usually fights out of Sanford MMA, trained for this fight in England, in his home country, facing Emeev, who is 5-1 in the UFC. But I want to see this guy tested. I want to see him against some good competition. He's been a pretty significant favorite in the majority of his bouts. I am curious to see where you're going with this on one. Ian, you like Roberts or you like Emeev in this fight?
I think Emeev is just too much for Roberts, especially the way he fights. His striking from a distance is gotten better, and once he gets this fight to the ground, I just don't see how Roberts gets away. This is someone in Emeev who just becomes a human blanket. His grappling skills, the ground and pound, it's just there. And for Roberts, this long layoff, his last few fights, the performance has not been there. We've seen him getting knocked out. We've seen his striking just not from where he was. It's kind of like he's hit this bump in the road that he hasn't figured out how to get past it yet. I think Emeev is the way to go here. Again, another type of parlay piece we'll talk about later in the show. But for me, Emeev's the way to go here until proven otherwise.
Okay, so you like Emeev to go 6-1 in the UFC. Let's round out the prelims here with Andrew Sanchez versus Bruno Silva. Sanchez, a guy who's trained at TriStar for a long time, but he spent some time for this camp in San Jose, an American Kickboxing Academy, aka taking on a guy in Bruno Silva, 20-6 overall in his fight career. Are you impressed with Bruno Silva? He is the favorite here at -170, or do you like the dog at Andrew Sanchez +145?
Well, I'll start off with Bruno Silva. I do like him in this fight, and I am impressed with him so far. I mean, coming off a 2-year layoff, and then when his fight against Wellington Turman, we knew that he had to keep the fight standing in order to win. Turman got him to the ground early on, which was very smart. And somehow he was not able to secure the submission win. And once Silva got on top and was able to stand up, he finished that fight pretty quickly. He carries tremendous power in his hands. He is a knockout artist to the T. And for someone like Andrew Sanchez, when he first started his career with The Ultimate Fighter, he was more of a grappler. His stand-up was just being used to lead into the clinch, get the fight to the floor, and either get submissions or control almost and kind of grind out victories here. You know, once he got that knockout over Wellington Turman, I think he got a little too confident in his hands, was too willing to engage in brawl. We saw in his last fight against Murdov, not the way to go. He got knocked out. I think he went to AKA to get back to his wrestling, his grappling roots, because against Silva, that's his clear path to victory. However, I just think he gets too accepting of positions. I think he likes to engage in the stand-up too much, and against Bruno Silva, that's not the way to go. So I think Bruno Silva's power is above everything in this fight. At minus 170, we could take him straight. Now, if you don't want to lay that juice, and I understand, and you believe in Bruno Silva like I do, I think he gets it done inside the distance, and you're going to get plus odds at plus 110.
Spot on about AKA. I saw it the same way. Him going to American Kickboxing Academy tells me that he reminded himself that, hey, this is what I was. This is what I used to be. Striking has not worked out for me. I've fallen in love with it too much, but we will see if it pans out. You are guessing no against Bruno Silva, again, in that sort of the main event of the prelims, as we call it. All right, so that wraps up the prelims at the Apex in Las Vegas. Let's move on to this main card. 5-fight main card. Some fun fights here. I mean, Jordan Wright, always a fun guy to watch. I mean, his fights seem to never go past the first round one way or another. Manon Fiorot, who has really gotten a lot of attention early on in her UFC career. Jim Miller, of course, making, I believe, his 38th walk to the UFC octagon. 38 fights in the UFC for Jim Miller, Andre Arlovski, Carlos Felipe, and then again, that main event that I teased off of the bat, Aspen Ladd, Norma Dumont. Aspen Ladd stepping in on short notice against Holly Holm. So let's start again with that Jordan Wright fight, Julian Marquez. Both guys, really fun to watch, fun personalities. Marquez, Vegas likes Marquez here, minus 230. He had the long layoff. He's 2-0 now in 2021, taking on Jordan Wright, again, who I said just never seems to get out of that first round one way or another, good or bad. He is throwing strikes to finish the fight, but he has gotten clipped, most recently against Joaquin Buckley. Who do you like in this fight, Ian?
If I had to pick a winner, I would go with Julian Marquez. I think he's got more ways to win. I think he's also fought a little bit of tougher competition. He has also faced adversity differently. That fight against Maki Pitolo, it was everything you could ask for in an MMA battle. It really was. And he came out on top, winning by submission. And then against Sam Alvey, similar situation here. You know, in this fight, however, I'm going a different way. I'm taking a deep breath here because both guys, I don't think this fight goes the full distance, but I like over 1.5. Reason being is I think the first couple minutes of the first round, both guys are going to be a little bit hesitant to engage in the striking. Sometimes we see this in fights. You get two guys that are known for their knockout power, known to engage, really go balls to the wall here, and sometimes it starts off slow, and I think that's what's going to happen here. We've also seen Marquez start to use that clinch game a lot against the cage. Tire guys out, improve his position. He's not just throwing haymakers. He's not really being wild. He's being a little bit more technical. I think that's a huge compliment to his coach, James Krause, who's really guided him in the right way. For Jordan Wright, I think because he was knocked out by Joaquin Buckley, I think he's also going to be a little bit more careful in the way he throws. And plus, he knows how much power Marquez carries. So I think this fight, I don't think it goes the full distance. I think by round 3, someone goes to sleep one way or the other. But I am confident that we get to at least the second part of the second round. All of Julian Marquez's wins outside of one have been after that 2.5-minute mark. And when Jordan Wright lost to Buckley, it was in the beginning of the second round. So over 1.5 is my play on this one, and you're getting pretty decent odds here.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man. If I ever disagree with you, when I disagree with you, I'm sure it'll happen. I will let you know. I don't want to sit here and say that I just agree with everything you say, but I like the over here too, and for all the reasons that you said. It is a little bit. It's a little bit dicey. It's a little bit risky, you know. As I mentioned, Jordan Wright. I mean, he's got so much power. This could end at any moment, but I lean towards what you said. Marquez is aware of that. He knows that. He does come from a great camp. James Krause is a phenomenal coach. And one thing that Marquez said is that when it gets ugly, when it gets dirty, when it gets disgusting, actually, is the word that he used when I was talking to him about this fight. When the fight turns disgusting, that's where he thinks that Jordan Wright sort of fades. So I think he's going to make this fight ugly. I think he's going to lean on him. I think there's going to be some clinch work, and that will hopefully get us past 1.5 rounds so we can cash that ticket. Okay, let's move on to Manon Fiorot versus Mayra Bueno Silva. Fiorot, like I mentioned, getting some attention early in her UFC career. She's a -240 favorite here, according to Caesars. Of course, these odds are subject to change. We're recording this on a Thursday. Bueno Silva coming back at +200. What do you think about this female fight, Ian?
This one, I think the odds are a little bit further than they should be, and that's just because we haven't seen a ton of Fiorot in her UFC career, but what we've seen, it's been nothing short of fantastic, and she looks every bit of the prospect we think she is. Silva is also very tough. In her last fight, outside of that point being taken, it was pure dominance. Now, this fight's going to be a little bit different. She has to grapple. She has to put Fiorot on her back, or else when it comes to the striking, I think Fiorot is just light years ahead. I like Fiorot in this fight to win. You know, again, this will be something that we'll probably throw into a parlay because of the odds later on. I'm not comfortable going straight pick at -240 because she's still green in her career. She hasn't really been tested. And if she gets taken down by someone like Silva, I'd like to actually see her fight through some adversity and see what happens. That really shows us where they're at. But for now, Fiorot is the way to go, in my opinion. Her striking is just way far ahead.
I'm curious, Ian, because you said even though you like Fiorot in the fight, you think the odds are a little bit long on it. What do you think that this line should be?
Yeah. I would have pictured Fiorot being maybe like a -185, and that's only because Silva has had success in her UFC career as well, and her last fight, she was really dominant. Yeah, it's hard sometimes when you get someone in the UFC who's won very quickly. We haven't seen them, go the full distance, and especially when it comes to a certain level of competition. So that's almost like when you get someone from the Contender Series to be a heavy favorite, against someone who's been in the UFC. Or a couple weeks ago, we talked about Jalen Turner and Uros Medic. For me, that was tough that Medic was a favorite, especially based on the level of experience and competition Turner's fought. So to me, this is somewhat similar there. I still like Fiorot, but again, I would have thought maybe -175, -185.
Well, the production team is on it because as they're showing here in the graphics, Fiorot actually did open at -180, Ian, so that was the opening line. But a lot of money coming in on Fiorot, like I mentioned. I mean, they all like Fiorot. Everybody likes Fiorot because of what she's done so far in the UFC. So you do not feel comfortable taking her at that line, but you are going to throw her in on your parlay, and I believe that we have covered all the fights that are on your parlay, right? So why don't you go ahead and hand out that parlay. Again, winning last week. At +168, I believe, was the payoff for your parlay last week. What are we going with this week?
It started off there, but then when we lost Hawes, it went down. But we still got plus money, which was always a good thing, and we were able to maximize those favorites. This week, we're going to do the same. We're going to go with Emeev, Godinez, Fiorot, and we're going to end up with Ludwig Klein, +239. I really like that there, maximizing again on favorites. That too much to go straight on them, parlay them together. We're going to get a little bit more than 2-to-1 in our money.
All right, so there's the parlay. Let's get into let's talk about Jim Miller for a second, Ian. Jim Miller, obviously, like I mentioned, very, very active, very, very long career in the UFC. Looking at the odds of his last 4 fights, so Jim Miller, everybody loves this guy. However, he is coming to these fights as the underdog. His last 4 fights, closing odds, +210 against Joe Selecki, +105, +220 against Roosevelt Roberts, so he actually won that fight. The longest odds out of all of them was the one he won, and then Scott Holtzman, +120. Here, you're getting them at -220. So for the first time in 4 fights, first time in 1 out of 5, Jim Miller is a favorite, and he's a pretty significant favorite against Eric Gonzalez. And maybe that's because Eric Gonzalez is taking this fight on 10 days' notice. He's a UFC newcomer. Tends to fight a little bit aggressive, wild. We'll see if Jim Miller can capitalize on that as a veteran. Are we taking Jim Miller here as the first time as a favorite in 5 fights?
So, as the favorite with those odds, we're not going to take him straight. That's just too high. And again, I think there's certain fights it's just irresponsible to go that way, especially with how long Miller has fought. However, at any time for Miller to be the favorite, this has got to be it. But we're going to go a little bit different, and this is going to be one of our longer shot props here. I'm going to go Jim Miller by submission at +240. Again, when he's fighting someone in Gonzalez, and Brett, you said it best, Gonzalez fights a little wild. He fights aggressive. And we've seen when Miller has fought people like that, he is able to take advantage, take the fight to the floor. And once he's on the floor, Miller is one of the best to ever do it. He can get submissions from anywhere, whether it's off his back. But I think that what will end up happening, and I'm going to even take it a little step further just for fun, I think he takes the back of Gonzalez and gets this by rear naked choke. I think off the aggression, there'll be a scramble. He ends up on his back. Jim Miller +240 submission.
I can picture it, man, the way you lay it out. I mean, I can see it right there in my head. Gonzalez gets a little wild, and Jim is so crafty, so quick when he takes the back takes. And the submission game of Jim Miller, I like it. +250, I believe, is the latest odds for submission at Caesars. Okay, let's get to a heavyweight main event. I'm sorry, heavyweight co-main event between Andre Arlovski and Carlos Felipe. Carlos Felipe, the small favorite at -115. Now, what's interesting to me about this fight is that Andre Arlovski has not recorded a finish since 2015. I mean, if you want kind of consistency, I guess, in the way that this guy is fighting, Arlovski's, his results in terms of the win or loss has fluctuated, but I think we're getting a steady diet of sort of the same Arlovski. I mean, I can almost feel like all of his fights sort of looking the same lately over the last 3-4 years. So with tight odds, and a guy who I think has been very consistent and just like what we're getting from him at this point in his career, do you like Felipe or do you like Arlovski to get it done here?
You know what? I think it's too much of a coin flip based on the way both these guys really fight. Your breakdown of Arlovski was perfect, and I'm not just saying that because you're my partner in crime here. I mean it. He has come out, and I think because of how much damage he's also taken over the years, we've seen him knocked out really, really bad. He has developed a new type of striking where he's in and out. He's keeping the distance. He's using his jab. He's trying to not take damage. And we saw in that first round against Tom Aspinall, he actually won that first round because of his boxing. He was very precise. His angles were great. And against a guy in Carlos Felipe, this guy does not get finished. He also has good cardio, and he throws out a lot of volume. But the power doesn't really come until the end where he feels like he has to slug it out for entertainment purposes. So for us, we are actually going to, and I can't believe I'm saying this with a heavyweight. You're not going to hear this very often from me. This fight's going the distance. Since 2015, that stat that you brought up, Arlovski, I don't think he looks for the finish. I think at this point in his career, he looks for the wins and the consistency to keep the career going. So at -187. Now, I know those odds are more than picking one or the other, but we're not here to coin flip. We're here to win and get a good lean. This is going the distance, -187. I think both guys play it the way they've been fighting their other fights, and that's my reason. I think that's where we go.
Whew, I agree with the fight going the distance, but I did not know it was -187. -187 for a heavyweight fight to go the distance, but that just shows, man, Arlovski is not really throwing knockout shots. He's just not. And Felipe, he's got a good chin. Felipe is also gone the distance in all 4 of his UFC fights. So at some point, as crazy as it looks, there is value on taking the over of a heavyweight fight, even when you got to lay a little bit of juice, because these guys are just showing consistently that they're not throwing those knockout shots. And they both seem to have durability. Still, Arlovski somehow at this point in his career. Okay, let's talk about the main event. And as I mentioned right off the top, it is not the main event that we thought we were going to get. Aspen Ladd showing up this weekend, 2 weeks after she missed weight. So on September 22nd, Miesha Tate was pulled from the card after testing positive for COVID. She was supposed to fight Ketlen Vieira in the main event. So that very same day, the UFC makes Holly Holm versus Norma Dumont. The co-main, which was the co-main event already on this card. They elevated it to the main event. And then on October 2nd, Aspen Ladd was supposed to fight Macy Chiasson. And a bantamweight bout, steps on the scale, misses weight. Macy says, nope, I ain't fighting her. It's not even a bantamweight fight anymore. I'm not taking it. So then 5 days later, Aspen Ladd, who told me that she flew home that day after stepping on the scale. She was angry. She just wanted to get out of Las Vegas. She was on the first flight out of there, goes back to California, gets a phone call that says that they want her to replace Holly Holm, who had to withdraw due to a knee injury. So quite a ride to this main event, but it's an interesting one nevertheless. And from an odds perspective, it's very interesting. Aspen Ladd -130, the bantamweight stepping up to featherweight. Her featherweight debut taking on Norma Dumont, who actually trained for this fight in Las Vegas. She is +110. What do you think of this fight, Ian?
Wow, all those steps to get here, and we hope that it stays intact. So let's start off with Aspen Ladd. A couple weeks ago, that fight was supposed to happen against Macy. What we saw on the scale was scary. She looked like the Walking Dead. And, usually when a fighter goes up a weight class, sometimes they want to take some time. You want to put on the muscle. You want to put on the healthy weight so you can compete, because the size will make a difference, especially in this fight. What I'm curious about with Aspen Ladd is 24 hours after, you weigh in, you go to your fight, where does she actually get on the scale at that point? Again, I'm referencing Jalen Turner, and I don't know why he seems to be my point of reference for everything on the show today, but he showed us after weighing in at 155, he got up to 180 on fight night, right? With Ladd, I'm curious. I don't know how you go from training for a 3-round fight, having such a tough weight cut, and then 2 weeks later, fighting a 5-round main event against someone in Norma Dumont. Now, Dumont was unbelievable in her last fight against Felicia Spencer. We saw the takedown defense, her striking improved, and the cardio was there. I don't love this matchup for Aspen Ladd. Ladd has to get this fight to the floor. She has to put Dumont on her back early and often and really implement that ground and pound. Because if not, she's going to be forced to strike. And her striking, in my opinion, is not the most technical. The volume isn't there. We saw in her fight against Yana Kunitskaya, her coach Jim West said, minus all the bleeps, you got to go out there and you got to throw. You got to do it. And when she didn't land it, look at the result. I don't think that happens against Norma Dumont. We saw against Dumont, she was able to dictate the pace, control the narrative against Felicia Spencer. And she's also very good at grappling. So I think the striking goes to Dumont. I think the grappling at this weight class so far, she's also very big and strong. We've seen that there. So for me, I'm very surprised that Aspen Ladd, after the weight cut, going to a 5-rounder, going up a division against someone who has been fighting in this weight class. And I also think when she beat Felicia Spencer, that was not expected. People expected Felicia Spencer to win the striking battle, get the fight to the floor easily. And she didn't get Dumont to the floor to the last minute and a half of round 3. And at that point, she couldn't steal the win. So I think the value here is in the underdog and Norma Dumont. I do not think she should be the underdog. I think Vegas has this wrong, which benefits us. I think they're going based on Ladd's competition in a different weight class. And sometimes I guess that matters, but here I just don't see that style being the case. So if Ladd can't get this fight to the floor quick, I think this is going to be a Norma Dumont win. And at plus 110, that's where I'm going. Yeah, all of it makes sense. And to talk about where Aspen Ladd will come in on fight night. She told me this week that she's just not cutting weight, and that's about what you would expect. I mean, obviously she doesn't have any time to add weight to try and bulk up, but she did mention a few things. Right. She did mention that, hey, going to 145, I would have liked to have an opportunity to put on some weight. Fighting a 5-round fight, I would have liked an opportunity to do that with camp. So she is aware of those challenges, but I also think that she is just ready to go. Like she's coming off of that ACL injury, coming off of a long layoff, was excited to fight Macy Chiasson. That fight falls through. So her coach telling me that she just can't wait for the octagon to close and to get going. I think we're going to see a very aggressive start from Aspen Ladd in this fight. So that will do it on UFC Fight Night, the main event. Minus 130 again, Aspen Ladd, but we like the underdog at plus 110. Let's go to Ian's. We got best bets from you, Ian. I didn't even know that this. I thought we had already hit your parlay. You're surprising us with the best bets as well. I don't even know what the order is on this show. What are your best bets for UFC Fight Night this weekend? Listen, sometimes I got to surprise you. Also, I got to keep you guessing, right? I'm going to go with Ludovic Klein inside the distance, minus 137. Like I said, I think he wins this fight pretty easily. The ground game is where he gets it done. Bruno Silva, again, I think he is truly the real deal prospect here. If he can keep this fight on the feet, I think he wins by knockout, but we can even take him straight at minus 170. And last but not least, as we just spoke about in the main event, I'm going Norma Dumont plus 110. I think that Aspen Ladd's eagerness to get into the cage a little too quick, I think is going to play against her here. That does not take away from how good she is or her skill set or where she could be in her career. But I think that sometimes patience is a virtue. I think this one's going to not be the right call, but we'll see. But we're still going with Norma Dumont here.
I love it, man. I was getting ready to tell everybody goodbye, and you hit me with 3 best bets. So we talk about through all the prelims. We gave out a parlay. We gave out 3 best bets. You can watch all of these fights on Saturday on ESPN Plus. I will be there, like I said, and Ian will be checking it out right there on ESPN Plus. For Ian Parker and myself, Brett Okamoto, hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you made some money last week, and hope you make some money this week off of UFC Best Bets. We will see you. We'll see you next week for a big UFC Fight Night against Paulo Costa with Marvin Vettori. See you then.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus.